Martha, 57, never thought she'd find hope in a stranger's rant. But there it was, some guy Pike Place griping about crows stealing his artisan bread. Crows remembering human faces, he spat, like it was a personal betrayal. She almost laughed. That night, dusty binoculars emerged from her closet. Next morning, she joined Seattle's urban birdwatching fam farmers market, field notebook in hand. Turns out, tracking wayward crows and stubborn ospreys beat doomscrolling. Every scribbled sighting, a tiny Martha, 57, never thought she'd find hope in a scuffed pair of binoculars, same ones she'd once used to spot her son's soccer games from bleachers. Now they were trained on a flicker of wings, a bush-tit darting between maples in her neighborhood park. Her fingers, knuckles still stiff from morning chill, fumbled with her field notebook, its pages smudged with rain and hurried pencil marks. Eco-grief had settled in her bones like damp Seattle fog, thick and unshakable. She'd spent nights doom-scrolling headlines, her stomach nodding as glaciers vanished pixel by pixel. But here, among her urban birdwatching fam, a ragtag crew of teachers, baristas, and one relentless retiree who brought homemade scones to farmers' market meetups, she found a rhythm. Counting sparrows wasn't saving planet, but it was stitching her back into its fabric. Her deepest fear? That she'd become a ghost in her own life, watching world unravel from behind glass. Like those binoculars turned backward, everything shrinking, distant, impossible to touch. Then came day she spotted a barred owl perched on a power line, its dark eyes sharp as a punchline. Martha laughed, loud enough to startle a jogger. Clumsy steps carried her closer, notebook flapping. She sketched owl's stripes, way its talons gripped wire like it owned Dam City. That night, she didn't check news. She smoothed owl's page with her palm, paper warm under her touch, and thought, this is how you hold on. Not by staring into abyss, but by naming what still flies. Martha, 57, never thought she'd find hope in a scuffed pair of binoculars and a notebook splashed with rain. But there she was, wedged between dumpsters behind Pike Place Market, tracking a sparrow with a wonky wing, her first entry in what would become a field guide to urban resilience. Seattle's gray skies had mirrored her eco-grief for months, until a flyer for Puget Sound bird nerds snagged her sleeve like a stubborn branch. She'd expected earnest millennials, but found a ragtag fam of retirees, baristas, and a former jazz drummer who called pigeons sky rats with affection. Their leader, a septuagenarian named Gloria with biceps from hauling seed bags, handed woman a checklist and a challenge, map where hope nests. First, creator fumbled. She mistook a crow's molt for climate collapse, until Gloria chuckled and said even birds needed wardrobe changes. Notebook became more than records, it turned into a ledger of small wins. A heron returned to canal. Cherry blossoms hosted hummingbirds a week earlier than last year. Each scribble was a fist-shaken despair. Farmers' market meetups became strategy sessions over rhubarb pie. They swapped tips, how to ID a warbler by its hiccup song, where to spot otters dodging kayaks, but also stories. A young mom confessed she'd started composting to show her kids that broken things could still grow. Drummer admitted counting birds kept his hands steady. Martha, knees creaking from crouching in community garden thickets, realized she wasn't just tracking wildlife. She was relearning how to belong to a world that ached but endured. One drizzly dawn, perched on a repurposed fire escape with her binoculars, woman spotted a fledgling junco take its first clumsy flight. She inked moment into her notebook, page smudged with fingerprints and maybe one proud tear. Bird wobbled, then soared. Gloria bumped her shoulder, whispering, "Told you they'd stick around if we paid attention." Martha grinned. Somewhere between lost feathers and found purpose, she'd stopped counting losses and started tallying liftoffs. Martha, 57, never thought she'd find hope in pigeon spotting. Yet here she was, squinting through rain-flecked binoculars, a disheveled crow perched on a power line, scribbling notes with fingers stiff from November chill. 3 months into joining Seattle's Urban Birdwatch Collective, her field notebook bulged with ink-smudged observations, not just species counts, but small rebellions against despair. Eco-grief had gnawed her since retirement, headlines about melting glaciers and wildfires blurring into one paralyzing hum. but tracking downtown sparrows who nested in traffic lights, or barred owl pair raising chicks in a city park's Douglas fir, carved tiny footholds in landslide. Her first misstep came when she logged a common starling as a rare vagrant. Collective's chat lit up with gentle corrections. Instead of shrinking back, Martha bought a second-hand field guide and stubbornly pushed through embarrassment. Farmers market meetups became her secret weapon. Between honey stalls and heirloom tomatoes, she'd swap stories with fellow bird nerds, a barista who ID'd warblers by ear, a grandma who tracked hummingbird migrations. Their laughter over misidentified gulls. Seagull? Fam, that's a glorified dumpster chicken, made science feel less like a lecture, more like gossip about feathery neighbors. One sleeting Tuesday, Martha spotted a lone bufflehead duck circling a storm drain. Binoculars trembled in her grip, not from cold, but recognition. That duck fought filthy urban currents just like she fought urge to numb out with doom scrolls. Later, logging sighting, she underlined its name twice. Proof that resilience wasn't about grand gestures, but showing up, notebook damp and knees creaking, to witness what still thrived. By spring, her entries helped map shifting migration patterns for UW's climate study. No Nobel Prize, just chicken scratch data on robins nesting earlier, crows growing bolder. But each scribble was a middle finger to helplessness. Martha's binoculars stayed slung around her neck now, lenses perpetually smudged by fingerprints and hope. Martha, 57, never thought she'd find hope in a scrappy band of urban birdwatchers, but there she was, clutching binoculars like a lifeline, scribbling notes with ink-stained fingers. Climate grief had hollowed her out, until she spotted a violet-green swallow darting past her apartment window. That tiny flash of iridescence cracked something open. Now, every dawn found her prowling Seattle's alleys and overpasses, field notebook bulging with observations. Her big move? Turning a farmer's market meetup into a full-blown workshop. Skeptical neighbors smirked when she unfurled her birding for broken-hearted banner between kale stalls. But woman had guts, plus a secret weapon, a grainy phone shot of a peregrine falcon snatching lunch off a skyscraper. She slapped it on community board. This, she declared, is our wild, messy, surviving city. Cue twist. Next morning, her falcon pic had gone viral, local news dubbed her Raptor Grandma. Suddenly, her workshop overflowed with curious souls, including Linda from Condo Board, who'd once scoffed about old ladies chasing pigeons. She handed her binoculars. Think it's silly? Watch that crow's nest by bus stop. Tell me it's not engineering genius. Linda squinted, gasped. Crowd roared. Martha's notebook became legend. She tracked how sparrows adapted to heat waves, turned data into art, watercolor graphs that made scientists swoon. Age? Just a number, fam. She led midnight owl prowls in rain boots, tripped over a curb, gracefully, with a middle-aged cackle, and still nailed Keynote and Urban Ecology Summit. Final scene, twilight over Puget Sound, her crew swapping stories as a bald eagle circled. Martha didn't just count birds anymore. She'd rewritten her story, one feather, one fearless act at a time. Martha, 57, never thought she'd find hope in a ragtag flock of urban crows, until she started scribbling their antics in a battered field notebook, binoculars bouncing against her chest like a nerdy necklace. Eco-grief had hollowed her out, but tracking scrappy birds who thrived despite concrete jungles? That lit a spark. Soon, her solo obsession became a farmer's market meetup, Seattle's quirkiest crew of silver-haired bird nerds, swapping tips over artisan sourdough. They called themselves Binocular Brigade, because why hell not? Each sighting was a tiny rebellion against despair. Martha guided newbies to spot fledglings in parking lot hedges, her notebook now dog-eared with collective joy. Even that one member who misidentified pigeons as sky rats became fan laughter crinkled their crow's feet deeper, but damn if it didn't feel like armor against doomscrolling. Years later, her binoculars, scratched, beloved, perched on a community center shelf beside dog-eared notebooks from a dozen others. Proof that purpose could grow wings in unlikeliest places. Grab your notebook, joys out there, waiting to be spotted.